They say hell is cold, but they've never been thrown into a Denver alley in January wearing nothing. They've never heard a mother-in-law's laugh, like breaking glass, as she tossed my wedding ring into the dirty snow. Hope an addict finds you, she spat. But they don't know. One call, and the man her entire family spent a lifetime fearing is on his way. My name is Alara, and I was 35 years old when the heavy oak door of the penthouse slammed shut, the deadbolt sounding like a coffin nail. One second I was standing on plush carpet. The next I was stumbling onto the frozen steel of the service exit, landing hard on the pavement of a Lodo alley. The cold hit me like a physical blow, -5 degrees. It sliced through the thin silk of my nightgown, instantly numbing my skin. Marcus, my husband of 5 years, stood in the doorway. His face was blank, relieved. He had just watched me sign the papers, the divorce decree that gave him everything, and the non-disclosure agreement that ensured I could tell no one. His mother, Brenda, stood beside him, a smug, tight smile on her face. She raised her martini glass in a mock toast. "Finally," she sneered, her voice cutting through the frigid air. "The trash is finally out of my house." She was holding my simple wool coat. I reached for it, a desperate, silent plea. Brenda's smile widened. She looked past me, down the alley, and then she threw it. She threw my coat with a vicious spin, aiming for a patch of black ice and slush 20 feet away. It landed with a wet smack. "Oops," she said. Marcus said nothing. I tried to get up, but my knees were already raw and stinging. I needed my phone. It was my only way out. "Looking for this?" Marcus asked. He stepped fully into the alley, holding my phone. I begged him. Just the phone. "Marcus, please." He looked at it, then at me. He didn't just drop it. He turned and threw it, hard, against the opposing brick wall. The impact was sickeningly loud. The phone shattered, skittering across the concrete. The screen was a spiderweb of broken glass, but the backlight flickered, a dying beacon in the filth. They went back inside. The door clicked shut. I was alone. I looked up. The Denver skyline was a wall of glass and light. In the apartments across the alley, I could see silhouettes. People were watching. A woman I sometimes waved to in the elevator was standing in her window, her own phone held up. She was recording. She didn't call for help. She just filmed my humiliation. 5 years. I gave them 5 years of my life. I thought about the woman I was when I met him. I was a rising star at a top-tier strategy consulting firm. I had a mind, a career, a future I had built myself. Then came Marcus, the brilliant architect with a vision, Urban Vista Designs. He needed support, he said. He needed someone who understood the business side. So I quit. I left my 80-hour weeks in my corner office to help him build his dream. I managed his books. I networked at agonizing dinners. I edited his proposals. I poured every ounce of my intelligence into his company. It was all a play. The realization hit me as I dragged my body across the filthy ground. The cruelty tonight was too coordinated. The divorce papers were too perfectly prepared. The way Brenda looked at Marcus, not with a mother's pride, but with the shared satisfaction of a long con finally completed. They had planned this, every second of it. My fingers, already stiff and white, touched the broken phone. The screen was barely alive, flickering against the dark pavement. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip it. The cold was a deep, penetrating ache in my bones. I dragged my thumb across the sharp, shattered glass. My contact list. Friends. They were his friends. Family. My parents were gone. Then I saw it. The one name I had buried. The name I had sworn, the day I fled Chicago for a normal life, that I would never call. Julian Vance. My vision was blurring. The cold was winning. I pressed the name. It was hopeless. The phone was destroyed. It wouldn't connect. I held the shattered wreck to my ear, my breath a ragged plume of white in the air. One ring, silence, then a click, a connection, a voice, deep and cold as the steel rail behind me, cut through the night. I've waited 5 years for this call. Elara. The alley. Behind the Lodo penthouse, I whispered, my voice cracking. The words were barely out before the darkness at the edge of my vision closed in. The shattered phone slipped from my frozen hand. The last thing I saw before I passed out was the concrete rushing up to meet my face, high above, in the warmth of the penthouse. Marcus refilled his glass. He and Brenda stood at the panoramic window, looking down at my unmoving form in the snow. She's not even moving, Marcus noted, a flicker of annoyance in his voice, not concern. Brenda laughed, that same brittle, ugly sound. She's just being dramatic. A little cold won't kill her. Let her freeze for an hour. It builds character. They turned away from the window, their laughter echoing in the opulent room. 15 minutes passed. The narrow alley was suddenly, blindingly illuminated. It wasn't the blue and red of police lights. It was a piercing, pure white light that turned the night into an operating theater. A silent procession of 3 matte black Cadillac Escalades, their engines barely a whisper, slid into the alley. They had no license plates. Their tinted windows were so dark they looked like polished obsidian. In the apartments opposite, the lights clicked off one by one. The woman who had been filming me, her phone vanished from the window. Curtains were drawn. Whatever this was, it was not something you wanted to be seen witnessing. The passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A man in an immaculate black suit stepped out. He was tall, his hair was silver, and he moved with an unnerving, calm precision. This was Mr. Graves. He was not alone. From the other vehicles, 6 other men emerged, all dressed in identical dark suits, fanning out to secure the alley with the coordinated efficiency of a special forces team. Mr. Graves walked directly to me. He did not hesitate at the filth or the snow. He simply knelt, his gaze analytical. He unbuttoned his own heavy cashmere overcoat, a garment that probably cost more than my first car, and gently wrapped it around my limp body. The immediate, suffocating warmth of it, the scent of expensive wool and cedar, was the first thing to penetrate my unconsciousness. He lifted me from the ground as if I weighed nothing. Brenda, drawn by the intense lights, had returned to her window, martini in hand. She squinted down, annoyed by the interruption. Then she saw the lead Escalade. On the grille, catching the harsh glare of the headlights, was a small, discreet emblem, a silver raven clutching a key, the crest of the Vance family. Brenda's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Her face, moments ago flush with triumph, went a ghostly, papery white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Down in the alley, Mr. Graves paused before getting into the car. He looked directly up, his eyes finding Brenda's window instantly, as if he had known she would be standing right there. He held her gaze for 3 long, agonizing seconds. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply gave one slow, deliberate nod, a nod of confirmation. We are here. He then slid into the back of the armored vehicle, placing me gently on the heated leather seat. The door closed with the solid, definitive thunk of a bank vault. The Escalades reversed in perfect synchrony and were gone, leaving the alley in darkness once more. I woke up to a profound, almost painful warmth. The cashmere coat was still around me. My skin tingled as the blood returned to it. I was in the back of the Escalade, the cabin silent and smooth. Mr. Graves was sitting opposite me. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. He held out a new phone. It was heavy, matte black, and unlike any model I had ever seen. "Mr. Julian is at the penthouse," he said, his voice a quiet baritone. "He is waiting." I took the phone. My fingers were still stiff, but they were working. He asked me to tell you he has already accessed their financials. He has a general idea," Mr. Graves continued, his eyes locked on mine. "But he wants to know your specific instructions. He wants to know how completely he can destroy them." I looked at the phone in my hand. I thought of the 5 years I had wasted. I thought of the shattered glass of my old phone, the sting of the ice, the sound of Brenda's laughter. I raised my eyes to meet his. The cold in my body was gone, replaced by something much, much hotter. "Completely," I said. "Leave nothing." The convoy didn't go to a visible, flashy address. It slipped into a private underground garage beneath a black tower of glass and steel, a building so anonymous it screamed power. There was no name on the directory, no doorman, just a private elevator that opened with a biometric scan from Mr. Graves's thumb. The doors slid open directly into a penthouse that was less a home and more a fortress. It was vast, minimalist, and cold, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding 360-degree view of the entire city of Denver. Julian Vance was standing by the window, a tablet in his hand. He wasn't the old-world patriarch I remembered from my childhood. He was under 50, impeccably dressed in a dark, custom-tailored suit, exuding the precise, predatory energy of a man who dismantles corporations for sport. He was the family's fixer, the one who made problems, and people disappear. He didn't look at me as I entered, still clutching the cashmere coat around my thin nightgown. He just gestured to the city below. "You came all this way for that," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the marble floor. "The Lodo penthouse, a man who plays at being an architect. This is the life you chose." Tears of shame and rage stung my eyes. "I wanted to be normal," I whispered, the confession tearing out of me. I was tired of the Chicago name. I was tired of people seeing Vance before they saw me. I hid who I was. I just wanted a life I built. Julian finally turned, his eyes as cold as the glass. "Normal is the most expensive luxury in the world, Alara, and you just paid the price." He nodded toward a large, wall-mounted screen. "Your husband is not a talented architect. He's not even a mediocre one. He's a fraud. Urban Vista Designs is a shell company, hemorrhaging money." "The man you married is a common con man." I shook my head, confused. "But why me? How did he even find me?" "He didn't find you," Julian said, a cruel, thin smile touching his lips. "She did. Brenda." He waited. I had no idea what he meant. "Her maiden name," he explained, as if to a child, "was Blackwood. Does that mean anything to you?" It didn't. It was just a name. Julian sighed, disappointed. 3 generations ago, the Blackwood family swindled your great-grandfather out of a Chicago shipping deal. It nearly bankrupted us. It was a foundational debt, one our family has never forgotten. The blood drained from my face. "You mean?" "Brenda knew exactly who you were the second her idiot son brought you home. This was never about love. Alara, this was about her finishing a family feud. She thought she could get revenge, use Marcus to steal from a Vance, to finally get the payout her family always felt they deserved." It hit me like a physical blow. The chance meeting at the gala, the way Brenda had always encouraged Marcus, pushed him, isolated me. It wasn't a marriage. It was a long con. It was her revenge plot. She thought she had escaped the past. Julian continued, walking to a massive teak desk. She thought the debt was forgotten, but by touching you, she just delivered herself, and her son, right to my door. He slid a thick, leather-bound dossier across the polished surface. "This," he said, "is what my team had on them before you called. I've had a file on Marcus Thorne since the day you registered your marriage license. I've been waiting." The door to the study slid open, and a team of 4 people in severe business suits entered. They didn't look at me. They looked at Julian. "Now," Julian said, picking up his tablet. Let's review what's new. Let's see what they've done in the last 2 hours. The war has begun. Mr. Graves appeared at my elbow, gesturing to a hallway. There is a room prepared for you, Miss Vance. You should get warm. I walked into a bathroom of steam and black marble, a space larger than my first apartment. I turned the shower on until the water was scalding, and I stood under the spray, scrubbing the filth of the alley and the last 5 years from my skin. I watched the water circle the drain, and I looked out the window. From this high up, the city lights looked like a conquered map. The cold was gone. It had been burned away, replaced by a clean, pure ancestral fire. The next morning, I was not the woman who had frozen in an alley. Mr. Graves had provided a complete wardrobe. I sat at the head of a massive mahogany conference table in Julian's penthouse, dressed in a charcoal gray sheath dress that felt like armor. I was Elara Vance. Opposite me sat Julian's inner circle, a forensic accountant named Kincaid, a lead litigator named Pierce, and a digital security expert who just introduced himself as Ghost. "Oh, good morning, Miss Vance," Kincaid began, opening a thick binder. "We have completed the initial asset trace. As your uncle suspected, Urban Vista Designs is functionally insolvent." She pushed the binder toward me. "The company is leveraged for over $4 million. The debt is spread across 12 different lenders. The assets, however, are non-existent. The Lodo redevelopment project he listed as his primary asset on the last loan application. The permits were faked. The Aspen Modern project. The photos on his website are stock images he purchased 2 years ago. He has been running a classic shell, creating ghost projects to secure loans, then laundering the money. I processed this. He was a common thief, but something didn't add up. $4 million in debt, I said, my voice steady. But the penthouse, the cars, the dinners, our entire lifestyle, that costs more than his loans could cover. Where did the rest of the money come from? Kincaid looked at Julian. Julian gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "It came from you," Kincaid said, her voice devoid of emotion. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "That's impossible. I have nothing. Marcus made me sign a document stating I had no assets. I had no assets. I gave up my job. My accounts were all joint, and he cleaned them out before he threw me out." "Not those accounts." Pierce, the litigator, chimed in. His voice was sharp, like grinding glass. "We are referring to the Alvington Trust." My blood ran cold. The Alvington Trust was my mother's legacy. It was $2 million, ironclad, locked away until my 40th birthday. I was still 5 years away. I had told Marcus about it once, long ago, in a moment of sleepy post-wine honesty. A nest egg, I had called it. "It's inaccessible," I stated. "My mother made sure of it." "It was," Pierce corrected. "Your mother-in-law, Brenda, didn't just work in law. She was a paralegal in estate and probate for 20 years before she was disbarred for what her file calls creative filing. She knew exactly which loopholes to exploit." He projected a document onto the wall-mounted screen. It was a loan application from a private lender, secured against the trust's principal. "They couldn't break the trust," Pierce explained. "So they did the next best thing. They used it as collateral. They forged your signature, filed for an emergency power of attorney by claiming you were mentally and financially incapacitated, and mortgaged your inheritance to the hilt." The room spun. "For 5 years, Elara," Julian said, his voice cutting through my shock. "Every time Marcus told you the company had a great quarter, every time he bought you a piece of jewelry, every time he paid for one of those ridiculous parties, he was graciously letting you spend your own money. He was paying the interest on the loans with your principal and funneling the rest into his own offshore accounts." The full, horrifying scope of the betrayal settled on me. It wasn't just a failed marriage. It wasn't just a family feud. It was a 5-year heist, meticulously planned and executed, with me as the unwitting bank. "There's more," Ghost said, speaking for the first time. His voice was a quiet click. We pulled his travel manifests. He has a one-way ticket booked, departing in 6 days. Destination a small island in the Caribbean with no extradition treaty with the United States. The divorce, the NDA, throwing me into the alley with nothing. It wasn't just cruelty. It was cleanup. He was tying off the last loose end. He thought I would be a broken, penniless, homeless woman who no one would believe. He planned to be on a beach, sipping a cocktail paid for with my mother's money, while I froze to death. I looked at Julian. He was watching me, gauging my reaction. He had the faintest trace of a smile on his face. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk directly into a steel trap. "By forcing you to sign that NDA," Julian said, "the one that explicitly states you have no further claims," after he had already committed felony fraud against your trust. He just handed us the weapon. He signed his own financial death warrant. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She was not the victim from the alley. She was not the supportive, naive wife. The long, soft hair I had kept because Marcus liked it was gone, replaced by a sharp, severe bob that ended at my jawline. The comfortable, muted tones of the wife were gone, replaced by a wardrobe of razor-sharp silhouettes, dark colors, and unforgiving fabrics. The woman in the mirror was Alara Vance, a major shareholder in Vance Strategic Holdings, one of the most ruthless private equity firms in Chicago. The woman in the mirror was cold, focused, and she had just been handed a declaration of war. I turned back to the conference room. Julian, Kincaid, Pierce, and Ghost were waiting. They were my team now. "Julian," I said, my voice new, clipped. "You said this is my war. You provide the weapons." "At your command, Madam Chairwoman," he replied, a subtle acknowledgement of the shift. I was no longer the runaway niece. I was his business partner. Good. First, the trust. I want a complete freeze on every account tied to Marcus Thorne and Brenda Blackwood. I want an injunction filed against the lender who approved the loan against my trust. Pierce, I want you to personally oversee it. I want them to wake up and find their credit cards declined, their bank accounts empty. I want them to feel the panic of having nothing. Today. Pierce nodded, already typing on his laptop. "Consider it done." "Kincaid," I continued. "The company, Urban Vista Designs. It's $4 million in debt." "Who holds it?" 12 lenders, as I said, she replied. "Mostly smaller, private credit firms. High risk, high interest loans." "Excellent. Ghost. Find me the managing director of every single one of those firms. I want their names, their numbers, and their price." Mr. Graves entered the room silently and stood by my side. "Miss Vance," he said quietly, "we have a development. Our surveillance on the penthouse shows a realtor has just left. It appears Mr. Thorne and his mother are attempting to sell the property. They've listed it for an expedited cash sale." I almost laughed. Of course. Their final move. Liquidate the last asset bought with my money and run for the plane. "Let them sell it," I said. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Alara, let them think they're winning. Let them get the thrill of the sale. Julian, I want you to set up a new shell corporation, something untraceable. Have that corporation make them an offer, over asking price. Cash. Close in 48 hours. I want them to feel that false, desperate relief. I want them to taste the victory." "And then?" Julian asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. He already knew. "And then," I said, turning back to Kincaid, "while they are distracted by the penthouse sale, I want you to buy their debt. All of it. Go to every one of those 12 lenders and make them an offer they cannot refuse. Pay a premium. I don't care about the cost. I want to own every single dollar he owes. By the time that penthouse sale closes, I want to be the sole creditor of Urban Vista Designs." The room was silent. The plan settled. 1. The financial attack frees their current assets. 2. The psychological attack. Give them a false victory, a taste of escape. 3. The legal attack Pierce would simultaneously file the civil suit for the fraudulent trust. And finally, the checkmate I would become their only lender. The woman they threw into the alley would own their entire fraudulent life. "They're not just going to jail," I said, looking out the window at the city below. "First, they're going to be bankrupt. Then, they're going to be humiliated. And then, when they have absolutely nothing left, I'll send them to prison." I looked back at the reflection in the dark glass. The Queen was back on the board. In the security penthouse, I sat before a wall of monitors. Ghost had done his work well. The buyers from my shell corporation had inspected the penthouse 2 days prior, and in doing so, had planted military-grade audio and video surveillance in every room. I was watching them live. Marcus was pouring champagne, the expensive kind he always bought with my money. Brenda was holding her glass high, her face flush with victory. "To a clean break," Brenda toasted, her voice tinny through the speakers. "The wire transfer for the sale is confirmed for tomorrow morning. 8 figures. Marcus." "We did it." "6 more days, Mom," Marcus said, grinning as he clinked her glass. "6 more days and we'll be on a beach, and she'll be, well, who cares what she'll be? Probably a statistic." They laughed. That same brittle, ugly laugh I remembered from the alley. I looked at Ghost, who sat at a console next to me. "Now." Ghost tapped a single key. "Email sent," he said. On the monitor, Marcus's phone buzzed on the counter. "Hold on," he said, still smiling. "Probably just to the concierge." He picked up the phone. He read the screen. I watched his smile not just fade, but evaporate. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sick gray. The champagne glass tilted in his hand, spilling onto the marble floor. "What?" Brenda snapped, her good mood vanishing. "What is it?" Marcus was reading aloud, his voice a disbelieving stammer. "Notice of acquisition, effective immediately. All outstanding loans and lines of credit for Urban Vista Designs have been consolidated and sold." "Sold to who?" Brenda demanded. Marcus swallowed, his eyes wide with confusion. "A holding company, VSH Capital." Brenda looked blank. The name meant nothing to her, but it meant everything to me. Vance Strategic Holdings. "Keep reading," I whispered to the screen. "What? What does this mean?" Marcus was scrolling frantically. "It says, all debts, totaling $4,200,000, are hereby called due. Payment in full is required within 24 hours to avoid immediate asset seizure." Brenda's glass shattered on the floor. "That's impossible," Marcus yelled, his panic finally erupting. "They can't do that. I have terms." He grabbed his phone and dialed his primary lender. I watched him listen, his face growing paler. "It's disconnected," he whispered. "The line is disconnected." He dialed his second lender, and his third. "He can try all 12, Miss Vance," Kincaid said, entering the room with a tablet. "As of 2 hours ago, they all signed very profitable agreements with us to sell the debt and sever all contact. As far as Marcus Thorne is concerned, his banks have vanished." On the screen, Marcus was hyperventilating. "It's a mistake, it has to be. They can't just disappear." Brenda, however, was strangely quiet. Her face, which had been white with financial panic, was now rigid with a different, deeper kind of fear. She was looking at the initials on the email VSH. She was connecting the dots. The celebration was over. The room was thick with their terror, but the main event hadn't started yet. That was for Brenda. We waited. 10 o'clock passed, then 11. Marcus was now drunk, alternating between shouting at his phone and collapsing in a chair. Brenda sat perfectly still, staring at the dark window. At exactly midnight, I nodded at Ghost. Her personal phone, the one she keeps in her purse. Ghost routed the call. On the monitor, Brenda flinched as her purse began to ring. It was an unknown, blocked number. Marcus, lost in his own drunken panic. Didn't even notice. Brenda stared at the purse as if it were a snake. Slowly, her hand trembling. She reached in and answered it. "Who is this?" she whispered. Ghost hit the key. He didn't play a voice. He played a sound file. Through the speakers, I could just hear it. The slow, heavy, mechanical tick-tock of a very specific, very old grandfather clock. It was the sound from my great-grandfather's study in Chicago. It was the sound the Vance family sent to its oldest debtors, the sound that meant the debt was being called in, the sound that meant all negotiation was over. Brenda made a sound I will never forget. It was a high, thin gasp, as if all the air had been pulled from her lungs, her face contorted in a mask of pure ancestral terror. She threw the phone across the room, smashing it against the far wall. "Mom." "What the hell is wrong with you?" Marcus shouted, startled from his stupor. Brenda was backing into a corner, her hands clawing at her throat. "He found us," she hissed, her eyes wild. "He's here." Who was that? The lender, VSH Capital. Brenda looked at her son with rabid hatred. "You fool," she screamed. "This isn't about your stupid company. This was never about her. It's him. He's come for the Blackwood debt. He found us." Marcus was completely bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "What debt?" Brenda just slid down the wall, rocking back and forth, muttering the same thing over and over. "He's here. He found us." The psychological door wasn't just breached, it was gone. I looked at Ghost, who was ready to cut the audio. "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Let them fear. Leave it on." I thought my rage was absolute, but I was wrong. The next morning, Julian's team presented their final findings, and my personal vendetta transformed into something far colder. "Your husband, Miss Vance," Kincaid said, her voice clipped, "is not just a one-time fraud. He is a professional, a romance con artist. You were just his longest, most profitable mark." She projected 2 files onto the wall. The first was a woman named Cecilia Dubois, a renowned interior designer in Aspen. "He met Miss Dubois 3 years ago at an industry event," Kincaid explained. "He convinced her to invest in a joint venture, a luxury sustainable cabin development. She wired him $500,000. The project never existed. The funds vanished into the same offshore accounts." The second file was a woman named Margaret Shaw, the 60-year-old widow of a Dallas oil tycoon. "This one was simpler," Kincaid continued. "He met her at a charity auction. He sold her a story of being a struggling visionary. She gave him a personal loan of $1 million to save his company. He defaulted 6 months later. Marcus wasn't just my husband. He was a predator who targeted successful, intelligent women, exploited their trust, and bled them dry. He threw me in an alley," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "God knows what he did to them." I looked at Julian. "This isn't just about my $2 million. This is about all of it. I'm not just going to ruin him. I'm going to expose him for every single thing he has ever done." "The Vance resources are at your disposal," Julian said. "Good. Get the jet. I'm not sending an emissary. I'm not hiding behind a lawyer. I'm going to see them myself. Today. First Aspen, then Dallas." I didn't arrive as a fellow victim. I didn't show up in tears, begging for help. The Vance Gulfstream touched down in Aspen, and I walked into Cecilia Dubois' studio as Alara Vance. She was a sharp, artistic woman with tired eyes. She was prepared to be defensive, to be guarded. I didn't waste her time. "Miss Dubois," I said, sliding a complete file across her desk. "My name is Alara Vance. For the last 5 years, I have been known as Alara Thorne. Marcus Thorne is my husband. He did to you what he tried to do to me. The difference is, I have the resources to destroy him completely. You have a motive. I am here to offer you an alliance." She read the file, her face growing pale as she saw the proof of his fraud against me. The faked projects. Then I flew to Dallas. Margaret Shaw was harder, more insulated by wealth and loss. She met me in her formal living room, polite but distant. I handed her the same file. Mrs. Shaw, Marcus Thorne stole $1 million from you. He stole $2 million from me, alone. We are just two women he scammed. Together, we are a class action lawsuit backed by Vance Strategic Holdings. I have the means to seize every asset he has. I just need your name on the complaint. She looked at me, her eyes filling with a sudden fierce light. Miss Vance, she said, her voice trembling, I will do more than sign. I will give you the weapon that finishes him. She went to her desk and retrieved a file of her own. I didn't tell my lawyers this. I was too embarrassed. After he took my money, I had him investigated, quietly. I just wanted to understand. She laid a document on the table. He didn't just lie about his projects, she said. He lied about everything. It was a transcript from the registrar of his supposed alma mater. Marcus Thorne had never graduated. He had been expelled in his junior year for academic dishonesty. Cecilia Dubois in Aspen had the second piece. When I called her with the news, she did her own digging. My God, she said over the phone. I just checked the state architecture board, the license number he used on our joint venture application. It belongs to a Mark W. Thornson in Seattle. It's fake. He's not an architect. He has never been an architect. The pieces slammed together. This wasn't just civil fraud. This was criminal. This was organized, systematic deception, operating without a license, wire fraud, racketeering. I held a conference call with them both, with Pierce, my litigator, on the line. Ladies, I said, this is no longer just about getting our money back. This man has built an entire career on a foundation of lies, backed by Brenda. We are not just filing a lawsuit. We are building a criminal case. Pierce, I commanded, I want you to use every resource. I want depositions. I want evidence. I want proof of organized fraud. And I want to deliver a wrapped-up, ironclad case to the Denver District Attorney. The legal net wasn't just tightening. It was closing. The trap snapped shut with the dry, impersonal click of a legal filing. Marcus and Brenda were at the bank, bright and early, expecting to transfer the proceeds from their fraudulent penthouse sale to their offshore account. I watched on the security feed as the branch manager, looking deeply uncomfortable, informed them that the funds were unavailable. What do you mean, unavailable? Marcus demanded, his voice echoing in the bank lobby. A judicial lien was placed on the account an hour ago. Mr. Thorne, the manager read from a printout. It's frozen, pending a civil suit filed by a Margaret Shaw and a Cecilia Dubois. All assets are immobilized. As Marcus began to scream at the manager, his phone buzzed. It was an email from VSH Capital. I knew, because I had written it myself. He read it, his face turning an ugly, mottled red. Seizure, he choked out. What seizure? Mr. Thorne, the email read, as you have failed to remit payment within the 24-hour window, VSH Capital has, as of 10 minutes ago, filed for immediate foreclosure on all assets listed as collateral for Urban Vista Designs. This includes the business, its accounts, and all associated properties. Brenda grabbed his arm. What does it mean? Marcus. It means, he whispered, the reality finally sinking in. The business is gone, and the money from the house, it's frozen. We have nothing. We're trapped. They had no money. They had no home, as the Shell Corporation now legally owned it. They had nothing but the designer clothes on their backs. This is when Brenda truly broke. Her financial panic was completely eclipsed by her ancestral terror. She fumbled for her new burner phone, her hands shaking so violently she could barely dial. She didn't call a lawyer. She called the one number she had feared all her life. She called Julian, from the security penthouse. I listened to the call. Please, she sobbed, a wretched animal sound. Please, Mr. Vance, I'll do anything. The debt, the old debt. I'll pay it. I'll find a way. Just call them off. It was just a game. Please don't destroy my son. Julian's voice was calm. bored, and utterly cold. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, using her maiden name like a slap. "You seem to be confused. Your family's debt. That's a rounding error. Your immediate problem is the $4 million you and your son stole from my niece. You should be talking to her." "Alara," Brenda gasped, confused. "But you—" "Oh, I'm not in charge," Julian said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "My niece she is VSH Capital. She is your new creditor. Your fate is entirely in her hands. Goodbye." He hung up. I watched on the monitor as Brenda slid to the floor of the bank lobby, a low moan escaping her. The realization was complete. I hadn't called my uncle to save me. I had called him to hand me the weapons. I wasn't his pawn. He was my general, Marcus. However, had one last card he thought he could play. With no money and no power, he fell back on the one tool that had always worked for him, his performance. He used his last few dollars of pocket cash to buy a burner phone. An hour later, my new, secure phone buzzed. "Ilara." He wept into the voicemail. "My God, Ilara, I don't know what's happening. My mother, she's lost her mind. These people are trying to ruin me. I think she set me up. I've been such a fool. I was stressed. I was scared. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. I've always loved you. Please, just see me. Let me explain. I can fix this." It was a masterful performance. Pitiful, desperate, and completely false. I texted him back. The Palm, 7 o'clock. He arrived at the restaurant, his suit slightly wrinkled, his hair artfully messy, his eyes already red as if he'd been crying for hours. He was ready to give the performance of his life. He saw me. I was sitting in a quiet booth, Mr. Graves standing a discreet 10 feet away. I was sipping ice water, perfectly calm. "Ilara," he breathed, sliding into the booth, his hands reaching for mine. "Baby, thank God." He opened his mouth to start his monologue, to tell me the lies he had rehearsed. He never got the first word out. 2 men in sharp, conservative suits approached the table. They didn't look at me. They looked right at Marcus. "Marcus Thorne," the taller one asked. Marcus looked up, annoyed. "Yes, we're trying to have a private—" "Detective Rourke, Denver PD," the man said, flashing a badge. "You're under arrest." "What?" Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Arrest for what? A bad marriage. For organized fraud, wire fraud, and 3 counts of practicing a licensed profession without certification," the second detective said, pulling Marcus's arm behind his back with practiced, painful efficiency. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Marcus looked at me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The act was gone. The con was over. All that was left was the terrified, mediocre man underneath. "Ilara, tell them." "This is a mistake, Ilara. Do something." I looked at him, my gaze as cold and dead as the alley he left me in. I took a sip of my water. "Take him away, detectives." Marcus's arrest was not quiet. My PR team, briefed by Pierce, had anonymously tipped off every major news outlet in Denver. By the time he was let out of the Palm in handcuffs, flashbulbs were popping. The story was irresistible. Prominent Lodo architect arrested for massive fraud. The mugshot of his shocked, tear-stained face was on the 10 o'clock news. Brenda, who had been waiting in a nearby bar, saw it all on a flat-screen TV. She fled into the night. She was now truly alone. A warrant was issued for her arrest as a co-conspirator. But the police were the least of her worries. Her bank accounts, like Marcus's, were frozen by the civil suit. The credit cards were plastic blocks. She tried to return to the penthouse, but the locks had been changed. A notice was posted on the door, signed by the new owners, VSH Capital, ordering all remaining occupants to vacate. She was penniless, wanted, and homeless, on the same freezing Denver streets she had thrown me onto just nights before. For 2 days, she drifted. She tried to call old friends, but the news of the Vance family's involvement had spread like wildfire. No one answered. She was toxic. She was a Blackwood who had dared to cross a Vance and failed. On the 3rd night, shivering, hungry, and consumed by a primal terror, her broken mind led her back to the only place she could think of, back to the alley. I watched her on a live feed from a new camera Ghosts team had installed. She looked like a wraith. Her expensive coat was stained, her hair matted. She was a mirror image of me, but where I had been filled with a cold, clear rage, she was just a hollow shell of fear. She began to scrabble in the dirty, frozen slush, her manicured nails breaking against the ice. She was looking for the wedding ring, my wedding ring, the one she had thrown into the snow. In her shattered logic, it was her last asset, a piece of diamond and platinum she could pawn for a bus ticket, for an escape. She was sobbing, muttering to herself, digging through the filth. It's here. It has to be here. And then, she found it, a tiny glint in the grime. She clutched it, a wild, triumphant sound gurgling in her throat. Looking for this, Mrs. Blackwood. Brenda froze. She looked up, her eyes wide with animal panic. Mr. Graves was standing at the mouth of the alley, flanked by 2 of his security men. They blocked the only exit. She was trapped. "The police!" she whimpered, scrambling backward. You're here to take me to the police." "The Denver police are not my concern," Graves said, his voice flat. He took a step into the alley, and she pressed herself against the cold brick wall. He didn't pull out handcuffs. He pulled out a secure satellite phone and a leather document case. "Mr. Julian is sentimental," Graves stated, his words hanging in the frigid air. "He believes in closing old accounts. He has authorized me to offer you one final choice, a courtesy, for your family." He placed the phone on a clean, dry crate. "Option 1. You do nothing, I walk away, and you take your chances with the Denver PD. They will find you. Given the evidence, you will be convicted as a co-conspirator. You will likely spend 10 to 15 years in a state prison. Mr. Vance will, of course, also pursue the Blackwood debt, ensuring that any distant relatives you have will be financially ruined for the next 2 generations. He paused, letting the words sink in. Brenda was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Or," Graves continued, "option 2. He opened the document case. Inside was a single, thick document and a pen. "This is a full and detailed confession. It outlines everything. The conspiracy to defraud my trust, the forging of my signature, the plot to secure the loans, the fake architectural license, the plan to flee the country. It details every action you and your son took from the first day you identified me as a Vance." "If I sign," Brenda whispered, her eyes fixed on the paper. "If you sign this confession," Graves said, "you will hand the DA a conviction for your son on a silver platter. You will be the state's star witness against him. He will receive the maximum possible sentence. There will be no appeal. And me," she breathed, "in exchange for your full cooperation. Mr. Vance will ensure the DA files your charges as accessory after the fact, with a recommendation for probation. You will not serve time. And," Graves added, "he will consider the Blackwood family debt paid in full. You will be free, penniless, but free." Brenda stared at the paper. The choice was clear. Her son, or herself. Her freedom, or his. She didn't hesitate for a second. She lunged for the pen, her hand shaking. "Give it to me." She signed every page, sacrificing her only son to save herself from the man she and her entire family had always feared. The day of Marcus's trial was almost anticlimactic. I sat in the front row, Directly behind the prosecution, Marcus, looking gaunt but wearing his most expensive suit, still carried an air of arrogance. He truly believed he could charm a jury. He believed his lawyer, a high-priced shark Julian told me cost his last remaining family favors, could paint this as a simple, messy divorce. "This isn't a criminal matter, Your Honor," his lawyer argued in his opening. "This is a marital dispute, a relationship that soured, a wife who felt scorned. We're talking about lovers' quarrels, not organized fraud." Marcus was watching the jury, a subtle, sad smile on his face. He was performing. The prosecution was methodical. They presented the bank records, the fake permits, the testimony from the registrar. Then Cecilia Dubois and Margaret Shaw took the stand. They were magnificent. They spoke with righteous, heartbreaking anger, their voices clear and strong as they detailed his lies, his emotional manipulation, his theft. The marital dispute argument was already crumbling. "The prosecution," the DA said, his voice booming, "calls a final rebuttal witness, Miss Brenda Thorne." If Marcus had been shot, his reaction would have been less dramatic. His head snapped toward the door, his mouth falling open. "No," he whispered. "No." She walked in, flanked by her own lawyer. She was not the woman I remembered. The smug, cruel matriarch was gone. In her place was a gaunt, gray-faced woman with empty, dead eyes. She looked like she had been hollowed out from the inside. She took the stand and was sworn in. "Mrs. Thorne," the DA began. "Can you please identify the man at the defense table?" Brenda looked at her son. Her face was blank. "That is Marcus Thorne, my son. And can you tell the court about your involvement in his company, Urban Vista Designs?" Her voice was a monotone, a dead recitation of facts. "I helped him. I helped him set it up." "And did you help him secure a loan against his wife's trust fund?" "Yes." "How?" "I used my old paralegal credentials to fake her signature on a power of attorney. I filed that she was incapacitated. I knew which lender to use, one that didn't ask too many questions." Marcus was shaking his head, hissing, "Lies, she's lying, she's insane." "Did you know," the DA continued, "that your son was using a fraudulent architectural license?" "Yes, I helped him fabricate it. We based it on a real one from a man in Seattle." "And what was the plan, Mrs. Thorne? What was the end game?" She looked at her son. "The plan was to drain her trust, sell the penthouse, and fly to the Cayman Islands. He had a ticket for next week." "Your Honor," the DA said, "we submit into evidence the full signed confession of Mrs. Brenda Thorne, detailing every step of the conspiracy." The gavel banged as the document was submitted. Marcus made a sound, a deep, strangled, dying noise. He collapsed in his chair, his hands over his face, his whole body shaking with sobs. He was no longer performing. He was broken. Then, I was called. I walked to the stand. I did not look at Marcus. I did not look at Brenda. I looked at the jury. I answered every question with cold, hard, verifiable facts, the dates, the amounts, the lies. I presented my side not as a victim, but as a CEO presenting a hostile takeover. Marcus's lawyer, in a final, desperate move, stood up for his cross-examination. He had nothing. He had no facts. So he went for emotion. Miss Vance," he sneered. "This is quite a performance. You sit here, so cold, so calm. But this man, he broke you. He took your love, your life, your money. He humiliated you. Aren't you just devastated? Isn't this all just the act of a woman scorned?" He wanted tears. He wanted me to be the hysterical, broken wife he had painted me as. I paused. I turned my head, slowly, and for the first time, I looked directly at Marcus. He was watching me, his face blotchy and wet with tears, a tiny, desperate flicker of hope in his eyes. "My devastation," I said, my voice cutting through the silent courtroom. Ended the night I was thrown into an alley. My suffering ended when I made that call. I turned my gaze back to the lawyer. His, I said, nodding toward Marcus, is just beginning. I leaned forward, just slightly. He didn't destroy me. He didn't even damage me. He just reminded me who I really am. The verdict took 45 minutes. Guilty. On all counts. The judge was not lenient. Marcus Thorne was sentenced to the maximum, 25 years in federal prison. I stood up. I didn't watch them drag him out. I walked out of the courtroom, down the steps, into the bright Denver sunlight. A black Escalade was waiting at the curb. Mr. Graves held the door open. Julian was sitting inside, reading a tablet. He didn't look up as I got in. A successful outcome, he noted. The door closed, sealing out the noise of the city. The car began to move. Julian finally looked up from his tablet, a small, rare smile on his face. Home, Chairwoman Vance. I nodded. The war was over. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.